Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Nicholas Richardson and this is the news. The Kremlin has sent a letter to Poland's permanent representative to the United Nations, Krzysztof Szczerski, in response to a call for the return of the wreckage of the Polish Tu-154 plane that crashed near Smoleńsk, killing the then Polish president and 95 others. In it, the Russians cite the conclusions of the Miller Commission and statements by former President Bronisław Komorowski to lend credence to their narrative that Russia was not responsible for the crash. Poland's ambassador to the United Nations during a Security Council plenary session reminded the world that Russia has still not returned to Poland the wreckage of the Tu-154M plane, which is key evidence to explain the causes of the Smolensk tragedy. I call on Russia to release the missing evidence, to return the wreckage of the plane that belongs to Poland under international law, and to allow Polish investigators to work to clarify all the circumstances that led to the crash so special to the tragic history of our region. If this evidence had been in Poland, then perhaps the investigation of this case would have been completed, and the theses of one or other commission would have been confirmed. At the moment, we cannot say this with certainty because the evidence is not there. In response to an appeal by the Polish ambassador to the United Nations, representatives of the Kremlin regime have issued a letter in which they repeat the Smolensk lies. The Russians cite the MAK report and the Miller Commission report, which duplicates the same theses. In addition, they also cite statements made by the then President Bronisław Komorowski and the actions of Donald Tusk's government. The Polish National Aviation Accident Investigation Commission also published its report on the incident on the 29th of July 2011. It contains similar conclusions as to the cause of the tragedy, mentioning, among other things, the descent below critical altitude at an excessive rate in adverse weather conditions that prevented visual contact with the ground, as well as a delayed execution of the go-around procedure. The content of the revealed excerpts is disturbing. We warned against confirming the Russian version. Today, the Russians can laugh in our faces. They can quote excerpts from the Miller Commission, quote former President Komorowski, just to avoid giving Poland the wreckage. On the 17th of April, the head of the Smolensk subcommittee, Antony Macierewicz, filed a notice to the prosecutor's office on suspicion of a crime involving the assassination of President Lech Kaczynski and the murder of the other 95 people. The notice indicated that there is a well-founded fear that the installation of explosives was carried out on Russian territory by a Russian citizen and inspired by an organ of the Russian Federation. Where is the prosecutor's office? Where is Minister Ziobro? Where are the trials and the individuals convicted? There are none of these. All we have is costs and a topic for pre-election propaganda in which the opposition will be implicated. All the actions that were taken by the government of the day were actually taken under Russian dictates. There was no attempt whatsoever to create pressure, including international pressure, so that the wreckage evidence would be made available to us and so that we could conduct an investigation. On the 9th of May, the Russian regime celebrates Victory Day. The Russian ambassador to Poland unsuccessfully tried to lay a wreath at the mausoleum of Soviet soldiers in Warsaw. The entrance to the cemetery was blocked by activists. Vice Chairman of the Sejm's National Defense Committee, Bartosz Kovnacki, indicated on air today that diplomatic relations with Russia should be severed. Russia should not be talked to. Representatives of this nation will not change their power and should be isolated. They should be ostracized. This country should not be allowed to do business through its various kinds of agents of influence or people not directly connected with the services, but nevertheless coming from this state. Last Friday, the Russian ambassador was summoned to the Foreign Ministry over statements made on a propaganda channel on Russian television. They called for the assassination of the Polish ambassador in Moscow. Dozens of Euromaidan Ukrainian activists based in Warsaw protested in front of the city's Soviet cemetery today and barred entrance to Russia's ambassador, who came to lay a wreath to mark the day.
On the 9th of May, Russia celebrates Victory Day, when the Soviets won against Nazi Germany. The Russian ambassador to Poland unsuccessfully tried to lay a wreath at the mausoleum of Soviet soldiers in Warsaw. The entrance to the cemetery was blocked by activists. Monuments as symbols of domination, these pins of Sovietism in Poland must be removed. They steal, rape, and murder. Russians have not changed for years, heartless and soulless, and this is our protest against such attitudes. I bow my head to all those who will prevent the laying of flowers to the ambassador of a criminal state. The protesters set up an art installation at the entrance of the cemetery, featuring replicas of shelled buildings and crosses, imitating tombstones with the names of children who died under Russian fire in Ukraine. We have set up our art installation here, which depicts the effects of Russian crimes in Ukraine. As a result, when the Russian ambassador to Poland lays flowers at the monument, he will have to walk through the symbolic streets of the destroyed Mariupol, passing by the bombed houses of Bucha, Irpin, and Kherson. If he cares so much about laying these flowers, then let him walk on the blood and graves of the Ukrainians who were killed by the Russians. Russia's ambassador Sergei Andreev chose not to walk through the installation and laid flowers on the ground before leaving.
Earlier today, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen held talks in Kiev to discuss Ukraine's integration into Europe and new Russia sanctions. President Vladimir Zelensky said as Moscow marked the Soviet victory in World War II. Zelensky told a joint news conference with von der Leyen that Russia had failed to capture the ruined eastern city of Bakhmut in time for the 9th of May and voiced gratitude to Europe for military aid to help Ukraine fend off Russian invaders. In my opinion, the Russian Federation, their military and political leadership need to sell something to their society because there are no victories. Their society is bloodthirsty and we see how they support certain radical actions. They are always happy about the number of deaths. They couldn't sell Bakhmut because they couldn't capture it. This was their last really important operation, to do it by the 9th of May. Unfortunately, such a town doesn't exist in its entirety anymore. Everything is absolutely destroyed. Von der Leyen's trip falls on the EU's Europe Day, which Ukraine adopted as its own on Monday, underlining its ambition to join Western institutions. Ukraine applied to join the European Union last year as the war with Russia raged. Zelensky said after talks with von der Leyen that he expected an 11th package of EU sanctions to be imposed on Russia soon, and that it should include powerful sanctions on Russia's atomic sector. He said he expected the EU summit in June would yield a positive appraisal of Ukraine's integration process. Despite the gestures of solidarity, Zelensky used the news conference to blast what he said were absolutely unacceptable trade restrictions imposed by some of Ukraine's neighbours, calling for strong European decisions to remove them. Last week, the European Union set restrictions until the 5th of June on imports by Bulgaria, Hungary, Poland, Romania and Slovakia of Ukrainian wheat, maize, rapeseed and sunflower seed. These countries have cited concerns that Ukrainian grain meant for export to other countries has ended up on their local markets. Harsh, even cruel, as for wartime protectionist measures from our Western neighbours can't help but disappoint, to say the least. Any restrictions on our exports now are absolutely unacceptable because they strengthen not Europe, but the aggressor's capabilities. We propose to establish a working group to monitor certain problematic issues, and we propose to refrain from making any decisions regarding trade without consulting Ukraine.
The immediate priority now is that the grain transit goes seamlessly and at the lowest possible cost outside from Ukraine towards the European Union. This requires a very close cooperation of the different stakeholders. Therefore, we will jointly set up a coordination platform so that we will get these solidarity lanes fully functioning. Again, this is important.
The European Commission, the EU executive, took the unusual step of publicly announcing von der Leyen's trip the day before she travelled. Visiting dignitaries usually keep wartime trips to Ukraine secret for security reasons. Russia has intensified its long-range attacks on targets in Ukraine as Kiev's forces prepare to launch a counter-offensive to try to recapture Russian-occupied territory occupied in the south and east. Russia launched at least 25 missiles overnight, with a large part of them aimed at the capital, Kiev, but nearly all of them were shot down, Ukrainian officials said. That's the news. Thank you for watching. Stay with us for the weather, Poland Daily Business and more programmes. But from me, have a good night and a better tomorrow.